Okay, so welcome back, everybody, to the new episode of the Crosse Thinkers. And today we have Dr. Nathan Warnerg from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics to talk about growth mindset. So thanks for joining us, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so we're going to start with what do you mean by a growth mindset, and what's the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset?
So I'll probably mostly be talking about growth mindset and fixed mindset with respect to beliefs about intelligence. So if you have a growth mindset about intelligence, basically you believe that your intellectual skills and abilities are malleable and can change. So for example, like IQ, some people think of IQ as just a fixed number throughout your life, but you can change your intelligence quotient if you want. Whereas if you think of intelligence in fixed-minded or in a fixed mindset way, then you're going to be thinking that your intellectual abilities and capacities, and even like your plateau, is set at some certain level, and once you get there, you're done. There's no use to put in more effort and more work to try to break through that ceiling or get over that plateau.
So basically your ability is limited by some genetic reason or...
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
I see.
Yep.
Okay, so how does the mindset affect our performance in daily life and academic success for students, for example?
So most of my experiences with growth mindset and fixed mindset are in the classroom, right? Because
especially mathematics, right?
Yeah, because I'm a mathematics educator, and I think one of the big, there are kind of like five ways of breaking down, or five characteristics that are very different when you have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. So one of the first ones is how do you respond to challenges? So academics is challenging, it's supposed to be.
Yep.
And if you have a fixed mindset, when you're faced with this challenge, you tend to get overwhelmed and frustrated, and you send messages to yourself that, this just was not for me. This is really hard. I'm not meant to do it. My brain's not wired that way, or whatever, and then it leads to giving up. And whereas if you have a growth mindset, when you encounter that challenge, you are basically sending these messages to yourself that, all right, this is hard. It's supposed to be. Just because it's hard now, just because it's a challenge now, does not mean that it's going to be a challenge in a week, in a month, in a year, if I put in the time and the effort. So that's, very different perspectives on challenges. And if you have a fixed mindset about a particular thing, you tend to avoid challenges because it's kind of like a self-defense mechanism. Because if you go into a situation that you know is going to be challenging and you know you might fail, then that says something about you as a person or something about your character or something about your abilities that you can't change. And then, so if you go into a situation and you fail, a challenging situation and fail, that's a personal blow, and it's not a good feeling.
It's almost like a reinforcement on what you just believed, right?
Exactly. Yes. Whereas if you have a growth mindset, right, you go and you kind of like, sometimes you like to seek out those challenges because that just because it's a challenge, that's it's not a bad thing. That's not a reflection on your worth as a human, on your worth as a person, on your personal character. It's just the way things are right now, and those things can change in the future. So and they're both very much kind of self-reinforcing ideas.
So
right?
If you have a growth mindset, every time you see a challenge, you overcome it, and that will make you believe in growth mindset more.
Yes.
So it's a self-positive feedback compared to the fixed mindset. It's basically self-negative feedback.
Exactly. Yep. You avoid the challenges, so you don't practice getting better at that particular thing, and then when it comes time to perform on an exam or something like that, then you haven't put in the time and the work, and then you fail, and it's reinforced. Yep. The other thing, so hand in hand with that, and very similar, are how you deal with obstacles and what you believe about effort. So if you have a growth mindset, obstacles and challenges are very similar as far as growth mindset and fixed mindset. The effort is a little bit different. So if you have a fixed mindset, when you struggle and when you have to put in effort, what that means about you is you're deficient in some way. And you also, right, if you have a really, I'm going to say bad or a strong fixed mindset, you'll believe that effort is almost pointless, because you have this belief that you have some set of abilities or skills, or some set level of intelligence, and there's nothing that you can do that's going to change that. It's already genetically predetermined. So any effort that you're putting in to try to break through that plateau or to try to overcome this challenge is pointless. So if you have a strong fixed mindset, it's logical not to put in effort, because you believe that it's literally just wasting your time, which again is this negative reinforcement loop. Whereas if you have a growth mindset, you believe that effort is really the key to overcoming obstacles and challenges and things like that. The fourth and the fifth things, so how do you respond to criticism if you have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset? Now, when I was younger, these last two are the ones that I struggled with the most. Like, I had a really strong fixed mindset when it came to criticism. When I was criticized, I would just shut down, because, and this makes sense logically from a fixed-minded perspective, if somebody is criticizing you and you have a fixed mindset about the thing you're being criticized about, they're criticizing you as a person, because you don't think that you can get better at that thing. Then they're not criticizing your performance, they're criticizing your current performance and all of your performances in the future, because you're not going to be able to get better at it. So, and I used to do this, I still do sometimes. I still have a hard time with criticism, which I recognize now, so I'm getting much better at it. But yeah, when you get criticized, if you have a fixed mindset, you get really defensive and you take it really personally. And again, that makes sense if you have this fixed-minded view. Whereas if you have a growth mindset, you're not taking it personally. You're taking it as, hey, this person believes in me, one, and thinks I can do better at this thing, two, and is willing to spend some time and give me some feedback about how I could do better. So if you have a growth mindset, you're much more, oftentimes you're more receptive to critical feedback. And then the last one is the success of others. How do you respond to the success of others with a fixed mindset and growth mindset? And I would say with a fixed mindset, you view success as a zero-sum game, whereas, right, there's this pot full of success, and there's a limited amount of it. And if you are successful in something, you take a portion of that success, and there's less success left over for me. So if you have a fixed mindset, there's this competitive component of being successful. And when you view other people that are successful, you feel threatened, because they're taking from that pot of success, and that means that there's less for you. If you have a growth mindset about the success of others, you get inspired by those people. So I always tell this story to my students. When I got to UW La Crosse, like a month after I got here, we won the Regents Award. Yeah. And right, so we're not just the best math department in this UW system. We're the best department, period. Like that's
with other science.
yeah,
and everything,
yeah. All, between all history, science, philosophy, mathematics, we were the we were the best department. And when we got that, I was threatened. I was like, man, like look at the wonderful things. Look at all the success that all these people have. There's how am I going to contribute? Like this barrel of success is empty, right? There's nothing. I'm not going to have a niche. I'm not going to be able to fit in. I'm not going to be able to help out. And then actually, so, about a month into class, I do this growth mindset, fixed mindset lesson with all my students, and it just hit me like, oh yeah, duh. Like
you don't believe in what you're talking about.
Exactly. I got to start practicing what I'm preaching, and I kind of knocked myself out of that negative feedback loop. But yeah, those are whereas right with the growth mindset, what ended up happening is after I knocked myself out of that, recognized that I was having this fixed-minded perspective, and then switched to a growth-minded perspective. What I ended up doing is I just asked Robert,
our department chair,
who when I got here I looked up to a lot. He had won several teaching awards, and I just asked him, hey Robert, you seem to be very successful in this department. What is it that you're doing, or what are some things that you think I could do that could help me be successful as well? And right at that moment, that's me switching from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Just asking somebody and saying, hey, what are you doing that you think is good, and what can I do? And of course, what did he do? He gave me great advice, right? He didn't, if you had a fixed mindset, I don't think you would do that, because you would, you might think that other person had a fixed mindset too, and they covet that success, and they don't want to share that success with others.
This was my born advantage.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Why would I share? I've put in a lot of time and thought and effort into cultivating my success. Why would I give it away to you, right? But
that's really interesting, yeah. So I think this happens particularly for mathematics class, right? Sometimes I do some maths within my mind in class, in classroom. People say, wow, you're so smart with numbers. I say, dude, I started doing this since when I was 7. I've been doing that thing for 30 years. So it's not because I'm smart, it's because I did it a lot.
Yep.
Same thing like if I'm in the restaurant, I serve really quick. Do you think I'm smart? That means you have been a waiter for a long time and you really put your effort into it, right? So another thing, people feel embarrassed when they do mathematics, just like, oh, I cannot do numbers, so I'm dumb.
Yeah.
The true thing is, do I feel dumb when I cannot dance? Like, no, because I never practiced. I would feel dumb if I practiced dance for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I still couldn't dance. That's the moment I know, okay, I'm dumb. I'd probably still give it up. Like, I never had danced once in my life. And then I make a fool of myself the first time I danced. Why should I feel bad?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's like, it would be amazing if I just did the first time without secret practice and I actually know it. Right?
Yep.
It's going to be even you yourself won't believe in that. So that's a really interesting perspective I thought everybody has, but turns out a lot of people won't actually even ask a little bit deeper on why is anybody performing so well on top of like they're smart. They were born in this way, right?
Yep. I have that same conversation with my students, about, right, the only thing that separates my mathematical abilities and your mathematical abilities is, 15 years of doing mathematics for 6 to 8 hours a day. Like, of course, my mathematical abilities are going to be higher than yours, because I've been doing it as, professionally or semi-professionally, depending on how you count graduate school and undergraduate. I've been doing this thing called mathematics consistently for, over a decade, for hours and hours every day. And that is literally the only reason why I can do this thing faster than you, or more efficient than you, or, see visualize the strategy, the solution strategy quicker. It's just because I've done, thousands and thousands of these types of problems. And you've done, maybe a couple dozen.
And maybe not in the right way.
Yeah, and maybe you've been doing it wrong. Yes.
Right. So seems like according to your description, growth mindset will give you a healthier view of effort, obstacles, challenge, criticism, collaboration, or like viewing others' success and yourself's failure. Seems like it's a wonderful thing, right? Is there any potential harm that growth mindset can give you? It's like, hey, I switched from fixed mindset to a growth mindset, and suddenly something weird happened.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do get the question. I've never had that question. I don't know. I mean, I can't. I'm clearly, so first of all, I'm very biased about growth mindset because what had happened, what turned me on to this whole growth mindset, fixed mindset thing was when I was a graduate student, I took an education course, and in this, it's called like, I don't know, college teaching or something. And in this course, the professor, Dr. Barb Lickleader, she did this, it's called a growth mindset intervention, basically. So we read an article about growth mindset, and then we wrote a reflective paper about it, and then we had a class discussion about it. And I read this paper and this article, and my mind just exploded. I was like, oh my God, this is me. This is why I can't handle criticism. This is why I feel so threatened when other people are successful. This is my worldview. And I recognized it, and then also recognized that you could change it. And then I've been, on this process of changing my fixed-minded habits of mind to be more growth-minded over the past, 7 or 8 years. So, right, there are some. Right, if you look at those, 5 things that we discussed earlier, it does seem like you might put an artificial cap on your potential if you have a really strong fixed mindset, and right, if you have a very strong growth mindset, you have these, right, your potential is, you don't have a ceiling, you don't have a limit. So I can't personally think of any negative aspects of the growth mindset, except for maybe, okay, here's one. So maybe there's something that you want to do, or you want to be good at or be successful at, and if you have a growth mindset, you know that you have the ability and the potential to do that thing well, but you don't put in the time and the effort, because of other priorities or whatever. Maybe you might have a negative attitude about that, right? Because you could do this thing if you really wanted to, but it's just not high on your priority list, so you don't.
We actually see some of this in our students or in ourselves too. Is just like, hey, I can do it, I just didn't put the effort or something like that.
Yep.
It's actually, from my understanding of growth mindset, it's almost feel like this is like a fake growth mindset. But we'll go back to that thing later to see. Okay, sometimes when you think you have a growth mindset, maybe you don't have a growth mindset, or at least in the wrong way.
When the going gets tough, that's when it really comes out.
Okay, so I heard so much good things about growth mindset. Now, let's assume I, as a student or as a general person, I want to give it a shot, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to make the transform from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. Can you walk us through the process, starting with how does this kind of mindset form? Am I born with a fixed mindset or growth mindset, or my education, my family?
I don't know the answer to that one either. I looked around for it a little bit. It seems pretty evenly distributed throughout the population. So there have been a couple of studies to kind of measure like what percentage of people have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset, and it turns out 40% have a very strong growth mindset, 40% have a strong fixed mindset, and 20% are in the middle. Between. Yeah. And where do those numbers come from? I don't know. I feel like there is definitely a socialization component for it, though, right? So, for example, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and right, of course she doesn't know it, but I'm giving her growth-minded messages almost daily. For example, right, when one of her classmates is good at drawing, and she's like, man, Stephanie is really good at drawing mermaids. I'm like, Stephanie has probably drawn a lot of mermaids, and she's probably been practicing drawing mermaids a lot. You could probably do that too if you really wanted to, if you put in the time and the effort. So very messages about putting in the time and putting in the effort to develop skills. I don't know exactly where it comes from, but it is pretty evenly distributed. And the interesting thing is, like you mentioned, you can't, if you want to, you can move the needle on your fixed-minded traits and make them more growth-minded.
So at least it's not 100% genetic.
Right. Yes. Exactly.
And you probably have seen a lot of people successfully just make the transform from a fixed mind. So it's not even a low probability thing, right?
Right. Yes. So I do this. So the kind of the first stage of changing your mindset is being aware of it. So for all of my students, after the first exam, before I give back the first exam, we talk about fixed mindset and growth mindset for the whole class period, and then I give them their exam at the very end after we've been talking about just because you don't understand this stuff now doesn't mean that you're not going to understand it in the future, and right, if you're not putting in the right kind of effort, right, expecting to learn things without any effort is that's not realistic. So we have this great conversation about growth mindset and fixed mindset, and then I give them back their first exams, and they're right. And these are a lot of times these are first year students, and so they're making this transition to high school, and this is their first college math exam, and it's hard. It's harder than they're expecting, and typically they don't do as well as they had in high school. So this is a way to kind of soften that blow and to simultaneously support them and explicitly give them this message that, right, just because you didn't understand it now, that does not mean that you can't be successful in this course eventually. You just might have to change some things. So that's the first step is, right, knowing what a fixed mindset and growth mindset is. And then the transition, if you want to start transitioning.
Before the transition, actually, I have a question to ask. So now, let's say I know the concept of fixed and growth mindset. How do I know myself? Which mindset I have? Do you have a quick test or several quick, I won't call symptoms, but like manifestations of fixed mindset?
So there are a lot of, like you could probably just Google right now a, fixed mindset quiz.
Okay.
And there's one that I've used with my students. It's like a 20 or 30 question quiz about basically what are your thoughts about intellectual abilities. And they basically are asking, do you think intelligence is genetic, or do you think it's a function of work and effort in 30 different ways. And then you take that test and you see where you fall on the spectrum. So the test has been used a lot in all of the research studies, right? They split the students into, growth mindset students and fixed mindset students, and they just, have them take this test. And then that, categorizes them for the experiment. So yeah, there's a pretty easy way to tell. And then, right, that's maybe a surreptitious way of figuring out. But if you want to so you could just, go take that test and say, all right, I think I have a growth mindset or fixed mindset. The other thing is being self-aware, right, of what you're thinking. So for example, right, with these five, like challenges, obstacles, effort, criticism, and the success of others, when I read the criticism and success of others descriptions for the fixed mindset, I just knew, oh yeah, that's me. And then I tried to be extra self-aware when I was in a position where I was going to be criticized. And actually, right, to practice, being better at accepting criticism, I would seek it out, right, to because I had to prepare myself for it, and I had to be ready for it. So asking for it explicitly and seeking it out So it was one way that I overcame that. And then the same thing with the success of others. I knew based on reading these descriptions that I had this fixed-minded worldview when it came to the success of others. So then I was, just trying to be self-aware when I was hearing about somebody else's success. And I was just kind of monitoring myself and saying, all right, what am I thinking? I should be happy for this person. They're my colleague. I shouldn't feel threatened. I shouldn't feel bad about myself. So it's really a process of self-awareness. And yeah, once you know where you're falling on the spectrum for any particular characteristic, it gets easier as time goes on, as far as being able to recognize when you're landing on either side, the fixed-minded side or the growth-minded side.
So awareness is almost like awareness of a growth mindset is probably the first step. Say, hey, now I see.
Yes.
And now I want to change.
Yes. Yep.
And then starting from there, actually things gets easier, believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
But right, like the growth-minded message would say, it's not gonna just happen, right? I've been working on it for 7 or 8 years. At this point, I'm pretty good at catching myself. And basically, right, what do I get good at when I'm becoming more growth-minded? I just catch myself quicker. Mm-hmm. I just catch those fixed mindset thoughts quicker. And at this point, I'm sure it's at least partially subconscious, right? Because I've been practicing it regularly for the past 7 or 8 years.
So it doesn't become a shortcut.
Yeah. Yep.
It's become part of your personality.
Yeah.
That's interesting because going to college is not just for knowledge, right? A lot of students this is probably the most important time of your life to form your self-awareness methodology, at least, right? Yep. So to make you a better person, to improve after your graduation. So, okay, so we know how to assess ourselves. Now, could you go back and elaborate on how to make what can you do to make yourself transform? Okay,
so, so the first thing is awareness. And then what I have my students do is, I just have them pick one of the 5 things that they think they struggle with the most, or that they want to improve the most, or that they care about the most. So let's say that, your thing was, you had a very fixed mindset about effort, and you didn't believe that effort was useful. You should either know it or you shouldn't, and if you don't know it, then, you weren't meant to. So pick one of these aspects that you think that you have a fixed mindset about, and then it's all about self-awareness. When you're in a situation where you have to decide, am I going to put in the effort or not, right? And there are those types of situations arise every day. You have to make this conscious decision to send yourself a growth-minded message. Say, this is hard, and that is okay. It's okay that I'm struggling right now. It's okay that I have to put in this effort. Because, so for example, in academics, learning is hard, right? I think that's I maybe touched on this a little bit earlier, but there's this dangerous myth of effortless learning. Some people just know things.
Which is ridiculous.
which is
I was born with quantum mechanics in my mind.
Exactly. Yeah. People don't just know things. They think about them for years and years and years, and then they know it. Yes, then they know it. But yeah, getting back to the effort, right? When you're in this situation where you have to study this particular technique or idea or concept, and you don't understand it after 10 minutes, right? Instead of giving up, you just have to say, well, there's more required. There's more that is required of me. And this becomes extra difficult. Let's put an extra layer on here. When you see other students or other people around you learning something faster, that's where that's when it's really hard to have a growth mindset. When you're seeing other people doing it seemingly easier or quicker than you are, then this fixed-minded belief that, oh, some people just get it and some people don't, that's when it's really hard to push back against your fixed mindset. And what I try to tell students in situations like that is, right, so for example, I can learn new mathematics pretty easily, right? I can pick up a paper on this, that, or the other thing. And, if it's really obscure, it might take me a week or a month or maybe even a year to understand it. If I gave that same paper to my student, it might take them 10 years to understand it. And the difference is I have all this experience that has been built up. And when you start comparing, so going back to this, student situation where somebody is learning it quicker than you, right? I would guess that student just has more experience and more background, and in the past has put in more effort at some point.
If you imagine this is almost like you have a professional runner transformed into a soccer player. It's just like compared to somebody just such. You both start soccer today, but he has 10 years of running experiences. Of course, he's going to be faster.
And you've been playing video games for 10 years.
Yeah.
right?
It's definitely an advantage, but it doesn't mean that, you couldn't catch up. Another thing to think about is also from sports. Actually, in sports, I think it's easier for people to understand. If you are a runner, you go there and see people with long legs to give up right away, just like my leg is shorter. If that's the case, you don't even have to race. You just measure the leg length and period. Champion.
Yeah, exactly.
1.2 meters and champion. Second place, 1.18 meters, right? It's not as simple as that. It's complicated.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we do end up in my classes, we end up talking about sports and athletics because it's a good analogy, right? I think people maybe in general are a little bit more growth-minded about athletic achievements. So for example, if you want to be able to, bench 250 pounds, everybody knows that you're going to have to go to the gym and practice and slowly make your muscles bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and put in all the work and the effort.
Well, I do have bigger guys who can, without exercise, they can lift heavier than you, but you don't feel threatened either.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't feel like I cannot do it.
Yeah.
Right.
This person is 6'8" and they weigh 350. Right?
Yeah, so of course they're going to be better than you.
Yep, exactly. So then how I tie that to the growth mindset is you should try to think about your brain, your mind as a muscle. And some minds and brains are stronger than others because they've lifted more weights, quote unquote, i.e., they've read more mathematics papers or done more mathematics problems or spent more time studying philosophy or have read more history books or this, that, or the other thing. So, right, I'm not trying to say that, learning is the same for everybody, because it's not. Everybody's going to have to put in different amounts of effort, but you just have to recognize where you're at and then, respond accordingly and put in the effort that is required if you want to be successful at that particular thing.
Interesting. So, but what I'm going to say to people who want to do this and they keep trying,
Mm-hmm.
making a lot of effort, just don't, because when you're doing weightlifting, right?
Sure.
Why we can have a growth mindset on that? And the reason is probably because if I do 250 today, within a week or within a month, I will be able to see the progress. That is 252. Or I see the physical change, right? It's possible in, for example, mathematics, you spend a whole thing on a month, you go into test 1, blew it, and you go into test 2, you feel like, okay, I had a growth mindset, I spent endless effort, I blew it again.
Yeah, those are the hard conversations when you see people putting in effort and then it doesn't always show up right away. And so there's this great website called Mindset Works, and it's got a growth mindset feedback tool, and it has examples of what do you say in that exact situation. A student is putting in effort and they're not seeing the results on the exams and stuff. One thing that you can do is you can talk about where were they at when they started and where are they at now. Because if they've been putting in the time and the effort, And maybe let me just make a little side note here. Sometimes they're not putting in the right kind of effort, right?
They just don't see it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And so a lot of students spend a lot of time rereading. So there was a study a few years ago where these psychologists, they asked students, what's your most commonly used studying technique? And the answers were rereading and highlighting. And probably not anymore because everything's digital. But back then, rereading and highlighting, 5-10 years ago.
No, just with a PDF file, but the same
Right,
thing.
yeah, exactly. Those were the most common studying techniques, and they're the most ineffective. So the next question I would ask is, so maybe we don't see gains. And then it's like, okay, so what are you doing? And what can we do differently to make the time that you're spending more effective? There's this great this book called, I think it's called Peak, and I'm gonna forget the author's name, Niels Anderson maybe, but anyway, so he does research about experts and how do you become an expert. And one of his big takeaways, or one thing that I took away from reading that book, is that it's really the type of practice and the type of training that is more important than how much of it in particular you're doing. I think he called it like deliberate practice.
Mm-hmm.
Deliberate practice. Identify a particular skill that you are struggling with, and then focus intensely on that particular skill for 10-15 minutes. That is going to be way more effective than doing, for example, a math problem that requires 6 or 7 different skills and techniques, and struggling through that one problem for 30 minutes. That's going to be way less effective than just focusing on the one particular technique or skill in that problem that you're really struggling with. So that's the next question I would ask is, well, what are you doing with this time? And because maybe we can make it more effective.
Interesting. So I want to comment on this. The first one is actually a lot of people got confused between familiarity and understanding.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. I am so good with quadratics. You change the number, it's okay. But once you move one term to the other side, all they need to do is just move the term back. They're stuck. So do you really understand what's going on? The question is no, but you have seen this thing for 100 times, so you're familiar with number 1, number 2, number 3, even though that's maybe a wrong way. Which maybe it's not a logical way. Maybe it's like an artificial created way, right? So a quick way to assess yourself on that is just ask yourself to talk about a concept. For example, don't do an example of quadratic. Just say how to do quadratic equations. Well, I need A, B, C. What are A, B, C? A is the number before, B is the number before, C is the number before. Okay, what's the formula? And if you want to go a little bit further, where does the formula come from?
Yeah.
Right? Instead of doing a particular problem, you actually summarize a type of problem together and articulate it. You will find how much or how little you know actually
yeah.
about that thing, right?
Yeah, the familiarity thing, this is exactly why rereading is ineffective, because you read it once, okay, and maybe you learn something. Great, you probably do. But then you read it a second time, and then you're like, oh yeah, I remember this. And that's you remembering that you read this thing. That's not you understanding, and those two things get confused. And then what you just described, I call this the blank sheet method for my students. I just say, all right, so if you want to determine what you know about a particular topic, you should just write, that topic on the top of a blank sheet of paper, and then give yourself 5 or 10 minutes and write everything you know about it.
In a logical way. Make it a paragraph, not random summarized.
Right, but
notes,
even
tips.
Right, and at first it will be random thoughts, but then if you do this type of process over and over and over again, then they'll start coalescing, and you'll start making stronger connections and things like that. And that right, this is the same as self-testing. Self-testing is an extremely effective learning tool, and this is just a way of doing that. Is just, all right, Write down everything you know about quadratics, right? If I said solve a quadratic, maybe that's at the top of your sheet. Solve a quadratic. What does that mean to you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great.
That's interesting because if you have if you're a student listening to this, for example, a really quick assess to yourself is, have you ever had this situation that is, I know how to do this in homework, and in a test I have exactly the same problem, but just I can't do it.
Yep.
That's kind of like a familiarity where there's real understanding thing, because when you practice in your homework, actually you feel better. You feel like you learned. Like, okay, I'm so good with problem 3 or problem 3 to problem 10 now, but then in the exam you still cannot do it. Instead of saying I have exam anxiety, what you really should look for is actually probably learn things in the wrong way. And self-assessment is actually a really good way of doing this. So this is what I noticed. A lot of students they spend a lot of time learning content, but they don't spend a lot of time learning how to learn. Or like doing, like the one you just mentioned, like if you have a new thing, with or without teacher, what will be your way to approach that thing? Do you Google first? And then do you find a video? Or do you do whatever, right? If you already proved something which is not effective and you're already upset about it, probably it's time to change a little bit way of studying, instead of saying like, hey, I just keep doing this thing for 10 other times, and if it's not helping now, it probably shouldn't be helping. And if you feel struggled, actually a really nice way is to just go to the teacher, because as a instructor, we actually see this kind of thing so clearly, even though themselves not aware of it. Just like clearly, maybe we should try something else.
Right? Yeah. I see this. I've seen this happen a lot too, where students, they're doing, I see them in office hours, and they're doing the online homework, and they seem to be putting in the effort. And they seem to understand things when we're talking about it in office hours. And then they get to the exam, and it's just, a train wreck. What advice I give to them is I have them think back and think about, okay, how much time did you spend with just you and the problem, and no tutors, no me, no notes, no internet? Because that's what a quiz is like. That's what an exam is like. And if you're not spending most of your time practicing for quizzes and exams, then just like anything, you're not going to be good at them. So I try to have some sort of a rule of thumb where at least 50% of your studying time should be just you and the problems. Because I think
not even calculator.
No, nothing. Yeah, exactly.
Or notes.
Yeah, no notes. No calculators, no internet, no tutors, no nothing. Because that's what's really going to tell you if you understand what's going on or not. And this is exactly how. This is one way that we assess whether or not you know what's going on. Is we give you this thing called a quiz or an exam, and then you have to show me without any external resources what you know. There's Professor Emeritus Bill Serban from UW La Crosse. He retired this year, and he talks about the self-testing as this self-testing problem where students maybe think that they understand it, and they come into an exam and get blown away. He talks about it as a problem of encoding versus decoding. So encoding information is basically, putting content and information into your head, right? And most students spend most of their time getting content into their head, and they don't spend enough time decoding, getting the content out of their head and onto a piece of paper. And it's right, if you're not practicing the decoding enough, then right, what are exams? What are quizzes? They're basically decoding tests, right? You've shoved all this information into your head. Now can you show me what you know? And yeah, they're just not. Sometimes they're not doing enough of that.
Interesting. So it's almost like that's why we say probably it's not too much a good idea to give you a practice test and then give you the exact same test than what are basically learning, right?
Right. Yes.
And another thing to think about is almost like when you're learning with all the help. which is fine.
Yes. Yeah.
At first. But then think yourself from a business point of view, if you outsource everything, now what if one of your providers refuse to help you anymore? Like the calculator say, hey, sorry, I'm not allowed in the exam, but you have been doing all the homework with me.
Yep.
So you're on your own.
Yep.
Like think about Amazon outsource all the shippings and suddenly UPS just say, hey, I don't want to work with you anymore. What will Amazon do? Amazon will crash overnight.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Given how strong and how big Amazon is. So that's exactly one thing you should keep in mind is just give yourself this. Another thing is just the self-assessment thing, which I feel like it's such a, because I'm doing that thing constantly since I was a kid. I don't know how I got that, but I find that thing super effective. But I also feel like whenever I communicate this idea to other people, they think it's a good idea, but they don't want to do it because it's so intimidating.
That's the
one view how little they know.
It's hard to do, and that's the thing. The learning strategies and techniques that are the most effective are the most difficult, because learning is difficult. And I think this might be another reason why rereading is so common. It's easy to do, right? It's not.
And you feel good.
And you feel yeah. And if you do this blank sheet thing, right, and you're sitting there for 10 minutes and it's blank. Even so, it's interesting. So the research shows that this technique is effective even if the sheet is blank at the end, as long as you're putting in the effort and trying to make connections. They're not sure what's happening in your brain, but something positive ends up happening, and yeah, there's some sort of neurological, biological things that are happening that are making you smarter in terms of this particular idea.
Our brain is actually very used to categorical thinking. They want to put things into categories. Mm-hmm. So imagine you learn all the new stuff. It's like you're buying a new shirt, you're buying new shoes, you're buying new everything. Now what you do is actually go to a bathroom, just throw them randomly on the floor. Now, do you have everything? Yes, I do. Now give me a pink shirt.
Yep.
Where are you going to look for it? Probably the thing you are going to do is actually surf from the left to the right with everything until you find the pink shirt. But certainly that's not a very, very effective way. So what you're lacking from your brain is just, hey, clean your room.
Right. Yep.
I don't care if you organize them by color, you organize them by underwears, jackets, and whatever. But next time if I say, hey, if everything is in their drawer, corresponding drawer with a label on it, now give me a pink shirt. Number one, you navigate through shirt. Yeah. Number two, you navigate through pink. After that, even if you don't have a category, how many shirts are there left?
Yep.
If there are only 4, surf through them. Maybe the last chance, the worst try is 4 times.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, and that's I think that's what self-testing does. Is it takes all these ideas, or this blank sheet method. It takes these ideas and it coalesces them and helps you, put them together in a meaningful, logical way.
So there's no way you can memorize all of them. Now find a way to memorize all of them.
Yeah. That's the other thing, right? I mean,
put similar things together.
Yeah. As a math teacher, that there are too many. If you don't understand the underlying concepts in even a college algebra class, there are just too many facts to know, right? And all of those, if you just understood a handful of underlying concepts, all those facts come for free. And I tell this to my students. I say, hey, you can memorize this list of 15 things, or you could really understand these 2 things really well, and then all these other things will come for free. And I think, right, there is a place for memorization, and I think initially when you're learning, anything that's complicated, you have to memorize some things because they need to be in your brain, and you need to be able to kind of hold them in this space and manipulate them in this space in your brain, and then help connect them to these other, seemingly random facts. And if you have, these 4 facts in your brain and they're kind of all floating around together, right? This is a weird metaphor, but right, you have these facts floating around in your brain, and you don't have any connections between them currently. If they're floating around there long enough and there is a connection, right, your subconscious is going to kick in at some point and be like, oh, wait, these 2 facts are actually the same fact.
Instead of 5, I memorized 1.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
And,
yeah. So that's actually what we call real learning.
Yes.
Right? right?
Yeah.
That's actually learning, and that is also called creativity. When you realize biology, chemistry share the same thing, or some phenomena in physics actually is the same as in economics, that's what we call creativity, right?
Yeah.
That actually happens a lot. That's very interesting because if you only remember simple fact, you're competing with computers. Because everything you can do in college algebra, including, or even in calculus, doing derivatives and everything, go to a website called Wolfram, you'll be crashed.
Yep.
So why are you learning that stuff?
Yep.
You're actually learning whatever you just talked about,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that, the computer suddenly become your tool.
Yep.
Do you really have to do the derivative? Not really. But once you memorize all the stuff, you put them all together, which become your own fundamental thing.
Yeah.
After that, now if you want to stretch from the core to some side problems with details, now that's when computer kick in.
Yep.
Right? But if you're actually everywhere without a core, without a center, then yeah, you'll be replaced by computer with no time.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's the so right, and maybe my colleagues would disagree, but I think that, for example, right, our college algebra course, and I also, tell this to my students. I don't think there's any particular fact or technique in that you are learning in this class that is going to be useful to you in your real life unless you be,
solving quadratics by hand. We are in a business accounting role.
Exactly, right? I don't think that there are very many of these things that are going to, be useful to you once you leave this class. And that's not the point. The point is this stuff is hard to learn, and in order to learn it, you have to think hard and use your brain. So really, I view this class as an opportunity to make your brain stronger, because no matter what you do, no matter what class you go to or what job you have eventually, you're going to have to become an effective learner. If you don't, you're just going to get left behind. So that's when the going gets really tough and they're like, man, this is really hard. My response is, that's great. It's supposed to be. I want you to struggle. I want you to try over and over and over again.
With different approach.
Yes, exactly.
Until one worked.
And what happens, in that, hour or two that you went from not knowing to knowing was, well, one thing is learning, and the other thing is, right, something happened in your brain.
Learning how to learn.
Yeah.
And this
exactly.
can be applied to other stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. So that's actually bring up to the next question. That is, so what will be the right way to think about struggles? And because you said now you're suffering good, right?
Yeah.
That's actually the
Yes.
thing. First thing. Now from now on, if you accept those kind of concepts, the first thing you should think about is for no reason, but I should say good first.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So can you elaborate on that? I read the book about growth mindset. Actually, they say difficulty or challenge is actually the only moment you're going to learn. If you come to a class, everything is so easy for you, you pick the wrong class.
Yep. Yeah, you're
Basically,
not learning anything.
right?
Yeah.
You go back and learn high school for another year, you would feel so good about yourself about getting high grade. But will you really feel so good about yourself?
Yep. Yeah.
Right?
I have my students do this weekly fail success reflection, right? And it's right over the course of the semester. I'm trying to teach these students how to fail successfully, basically, and how should you fail successfully, right? Well, basically, what they have to do, I force them to do it. I say, all right, you have to identify your failure. Okay, then what did you do that led to that failure, right? Was there a particular habit? Was there some sort of behavior? Did you just forget, right? Maybe they forgot about an assignment, something like that. And then the third, and so those two things, right? So identifying the failure, what did you do that led to the failure? Those are two critical things. But the most critical thing is, okay, now what are you going to do differently to avoid that failure in the future? And this is basically growth mindset 101, right? You failed at something, you struggled with something is really challenging. Okay, own it. What are you currently doing that is leading to you not being as successful as you could be? And then what are you gonna do differently? What are you gonna try differently next time? And then of course we also have this success portion of this fail success reflection, because it's really interesting. Most students have a really difficult time identifying a success. in a week-long span. And this happens every semester. You say, man, I had 30 failures this week that I wanted to write about, but I only picked one. I couldn't think of anything successful that happened all week,
which is pretty sad.
Which is sad. Yeah, I think that's a symptom of I think that's a poor reflection on American culture, like something or the American education system, something that's not good.
And we have a number.
Yeah.
65 is better than 64.
Yeah.
No matter where you're from.
Yeah. Oh, we'll talk about that in a second.
That would be my last question.
And then the last part is, right, the last part of this fail success reflection is, okay, now what did you learn? Right? Did you learn something from this failure? Did you learn something from this success? What did you learn this week? To constantly reinforce that there are successes that are happening, and that's great, and we should celebrate those. There are failures that are happening. That's normal. Like that's part of it. That's part of the struggle. That's part of academics. That's part of life. And then, right, what are you learning? Because that's the goal. And I wanted to say one quick thing. You mentioned something about personality. So this growth mindset, fixed mindset extends beyond just academics.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, right, it's
family relationship, for example.
Exactly. Yep.
Or the right view about relationships.
Yes.
Love.
Yes, exactly. If you have a bad relationship, you have two options. You can say, well, this relationship is just bad, and that's the way it is, and that would be a fixed-minded view. Or if you want to make that relationship better, you can approach it from a growth-minded version. All right, what's wrong with this relationship?
What can I do?
What can I do differently? What maybe I need to put in more effort. Okay, and what's the type of effort that I need to put in? Yeah.
That's interesting when you see people, I gave up my relationship with my father.
Yeah.
And your father is going to still be alive for another 40 years.
Yep.
You're just trading your childish fixed mindset for a potential 40 years of nice relationship, which you will never build with any single other person in the world.
Yep.
You better give it a try and try hard.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
With a growth mindset. That's really interesting. So another thing I think when students struggle with failures and success, because as a teacher, sometimes we're super happy. You're making progress. They say, no, I still got the same score last time. But I say basically because I graded easier last time. and I actually intentionally being a little bit harder and a bit picky on you this time with the same standard because I know now you know stuff. I want more out of you, right?
Yep.
But the thing here is like, a really interesting principle you can do is compare yourself with who you were yesterday instead of to somebody else is today, right?
Yes.
It's like if you go to Olympics or if you go to any kind of sports game, right? Will you be happy earning the first place always compared to earning the second place? Well, you can go and compete with a lot of like elementary school kids and you run fastest. Mm-hmm. Are you happy with the first place?
Yeah.
There was one time I do some martial arts back in college. I just fight with a professional. He beat the crap out of me. But the thing here is, the moment he's on stage, I win.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not professional. I'm just amateur. And somehow I put you on a stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So everybody was thinking about, like, are you upset? I was like, why do I be upset losing to a professional?
Yeah.
How many people got a chance to even just fight with a professional?
Yeah.
Right? That's a huge success.
Yeah.
So if you think about that thing, you should probably pay too much attention about how other people are getting evaluated. And also think about another thing is I know a lot of friends who are super successful in some way, like money, fame, whatever, who has a really bad relationship. And do I want to trade my life with theirs? Not really. Are they successful than me? Well, if you're comparing with a failed successful idea with one single metric, maybe.
Right.
But we're human beings, right? The beauty about us is actually we have multiple hierarchies. You may suck at sports, but you're good with painting. You have so many ways to assess yourself. Up to the 5th or 6th dimension, you start to lose track who's better. Kind of makes sense here.
Yeah.
It's almost like, you're better in everything, but I'm younger.
Yeah.
At least, right? So just eventually you will figure out actually your whole life is probably not a competition, but a constant improvement over your own life. And up to a certain point, you will find like it's pointless to compare to other people because there are so many different dimensions. Like, how are you supposed to be compared with other people?
Yeah. This comes up when we talk about growth mindset, fixed mindset in the classroom too, is this, right? That because a lot of students struggle with the success of others, and what they're doing is they're comparing themselves to somebody else, and just like you said, that's not a useful comparison. Maybe we'll say that, because where did they start, right? They might have started at a different ability level, right?
Or you have a different high school wealth background.
Yeah,
resource.
Exactly. There are so many differences between you that this one difference, right? This, they got a 7.5 and I got a 7.1. Like this, that minuscule difference doesn't make them a better person at all. And I have it's usually after the first quiz that goes poorly for everybody. I hand it back out, and then I have everybody put the quiz on the floor and then step on it and say, all right, now just to be clear. And the first thing I ask them is,
You definitely teach above my floor.
yeah.
I heard that from one time.
The first question I ask them is, if you got a good score, does that mean that you're a good person? And they're like, no. Okay, so now, if you got a bad score, does that mean you're a bad person? Oh, I guess if I'm going to be logical, I would have to say no to that. And that, right? But they do feel bad, right, when they get a bad score, and they take it very personally. And I try to get them to realize this is a 15-minute snapshot in your life, right? What were you able to show me in these 15 minutes when you were taking this quiz? It's not a reflection on your personality. It's not a reflection on your character. I don't care, right? I don't like students that get better grades more than I like students that get worse grades. I like students that work hard. That's the type of student I like. Yep.
I think for most teachers we can say that, like, we like the ones who make the most progress along the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
No matter it's in academic performance or personality. Like, you came in hate school.
Yeah.
You come out with a bad grade, but you like school now.
Yeah. Yep.
Because the thing here is, like, you guys are young, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if once I see you make the transition from hating school to like school, I know you will be successful after 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people underestimate how much they can gain in a long term, but they overestimate how much they should gain in the short term.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? Within 2 weeks, I should be here. No. You came in without knowing how to do partial fractions.
Yep.
But now you know quadratic. Now you're a master of quadratic, and you don't hate math so much. And you start with a 60, you end up with a 65. Not a big progress, but this time you really know the stuff.
Yep.
Now I'm confident you to proceed further in pre-calculus compared to some other people. They came in with a 90%. Now they're 60%. Judging on the grade, they're still higher than you, but they don't learn anything from our class.
Yep.
At all, and they're going to struggle as hell in 151.
Yep.
In pre-calculus, right?
Yep.
People don't realize that. They don't see things in the future that much. You should be excited.
Yeah, there are some students that come in and they ace everything, and there might be some points in the semester where they struggle, but right, there are some students that just maybe they only need one math class and they've already had calculus in high school, so they're taking college algebra, and it's easy, right? And they don't struggle, and it's not a challenge, and they're really not learning anything. And you compare that student to the student that came in and didn't understand the properties of fractions and really struggled adding fractions, and now they're doing completing the square with quadratics that have fractions and all this. That is a huge leap in learning, from not understanding fractions to completing a complicated square. Whereas this other student can do all these things effortlessly, almost seemingly. Yeah.
I've actually made the observation and actually the statement explicitly to the students. Some students I had in my class, and then I see them again in the next level class.
Mm-hmm.
From the beginning, they're not confident. I just tell them, like, you're not going to nail this class.
Yep.
You don't have to do anything extra anymore because you have the right mindset.
Yep.
And never missed.
Yep.
So far.
Yep.
And never missed.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
I think that's the right way.
Yep.
That's definitely the right way.
Yep.
But that go back to a question that is like, when we go back to a fixed mindset and we were talking about the society or the education systems,
Mm-hmm.
reinforcement on this kind of mindset. And one thing constantly hit me whenever I try to introduce these ideas or just think about it, about growth mindset, is like almost all students are evaluated in a single number system. And I don't think throwing that system out is an option, but how do we as a teacher to make the best out of growth mindset under this system?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know what else to do, but I think, right, as far as, GPA and ACT and all these other things, I don't know, a more effective and efficient way of measuring these things. But then within that system, you end up, valuing this person over that person because their number is bigger than their number. So and then the question is, well, how do we push back against that? I think
As a teacher.
as a teacher, something that I do is I explicitly talk about that, right? So, right, the stepping on your quiz thing. Just because you got a higher score doesn't mean you're a better person. It means that, in that 15-minute snapshot, you were able to communicate mathematics to me more effectively than this person. And trying to decouple their self-worth with their academic performance, as far as grades and things like that.
Is there a danger of doing that?
What's that?
Is there a danger of doing that as a student? If they become too separated?
Yeah, I don't. As long as you are simultaneously, which I think and hope I am doing, simultaneously encouraging their curiosity and helping them value the learning process, I don't think there's a danger. There can be, right? There are some students that are just purely motivated by grades, and they get great grades. But I'm to me, the danger with a student like that is, right, they're motivated by these external factors. They're externally motivated. And then what happens when that external motivation is gone, right? Well, then they'll, right, well, now maybe it's my paycheck. Okay, so now I'm motivated by my paycheck.
Bonus.
My bonus. But then, right, then their self-worth used to be attached to their GPA. Now their self-worth is attached to their paycheck. Right? Is that how you want to value yourself? Is that how you value others? So I think the decoupling is actually important because it will force us to value other things that I think are more important.
One thing I want to add is actually all the external measures, it's not in your control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's partly of the grader.
Yeah.
It's partly because of your boss.
Yep.
It's partly because of the company, and it's part of the economy.
Yep.
So no matter how hard you try, maybe in some situation it just won't work.
Yep.
And how are you supposed to respond to that if all your life, your worth, your meaning is attached to this single little one-dimensional measure?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And you lose the human side of it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, right. I have never asked, once I graduated undergraduate, I never asked anybody, what was your GPA as an undergraduate? It's going to help me determine whether or not I value you as a person.
Or a stupid reason, just like, are you going to date a guy with 3.7 or
Right.
3.3?
Right, exactly. Yeah, nobody cares.
But actually, you will be surprised how many people say, why don't you date me? I have a 3.3 or 3.7.
Oh.
The other way around actually doesn't work because they focus so much on a single measure, they don't understand why people don't buy that.
Yeah. Yep.
right? But from our point of view, it's so easy. Like, why do I want to do simply because I have a 4.0?
Yeah. So yeah, I think the decoupling of that value system is important, and it's hard too, because it's been, right. I mean, I don't know, when does GPA start? High school, middle school? I don't know.
I was not trained here, but in China it starts from elementary school, which is really.
Yeah.
And people constantly have pressure about, because the teachers are evaluated within the GPA, so the teachers start actually doing something.
Yeah.
In order to appeal better.
Yeah.
And then high school doing the same thing. It's almost like a game. We design the rule, then we play by the rule.
Yeah.
And
that happened that happened in the United States. I think it was like maybe 15 or 20 years ago.
No child left behind.
There were a lot. Yeah, there was all this funding of the school system, from my understanding, was basically tied to performance on these exams.
Which is how you manage a big company.
Yeah, which is like, right? So then, as a teacher, you have the choice of, do I lose my job because, right, I know that these students aren't going to be able to perform because of, not because of me, I worked my ass off, but because of all these external things that were out of my control. So am I going to lose my job despite doing a good job and doing the best I can, or am I going to cheat?
The problem here is like for teachers, right? We are constantly in a conflict role. That is, we have some beliefs, and we want to communicate our beliefs, but the school has its measure, and the parent also has their measure. And even if you did a good job, the parents will say like, okay, yeah, my kids learn a lot, thanks, but how is he supposed to find a job when everybody look at the transcript?
Yeah.
Right. So it's more complicated than, and after a certain point, that's the moment actually I feel like I could never do a good job doing like the elementary education or secondary education, simply because I don't know how to solve this conflict. Right. With my belief, I won't say against the system. It's just like it's really hard to have any belief in a system that rigid.
Yes. Yeah. I think. Yeah. That is one of the very nice things about working at a university is I do, right, it's the autonomy that I have in the classroom, and who do I really have to answer to? And to me, I answer to my students, and I push them, as hard as I can, as hard as I think is necessary. And sometimes that's really hard. And I can imagine if I did this in another setting, and actually this has happened. There have been parents that have emailed me from here saying, I'm being too hard or whatever. And right, because of FERPA, I can just ignore those.
Yeah.
But I can imagine in a middle school or elementary school situation, and my dad is actually a middle school teacher, and he's a middle school math teacher. He deals with this sometimes where, right, he pushes those kids as hard as he can, and they struggle, and they, because they've never been challenged like this before, right? And right, this happens to me. Students come into my office crying because it's so, it's really hard, or they did really bad in this exam. Some of his students are crying in the classroom when when it's really hard and this exam went really bad, right? And then they get the parents come in and they have a meeting, and then he just explains to them, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm challenging your kid, and I've been doing it for 30 years, and I always end up with great results. And I know that they're struggling now, and I know that it's hard for you to watch them struggle and not be able to help them in that particular moment. But this is good for them.
This is what we call grow.
Yeah.
Right.
Grit. Yep.
Eventually, you have the illusion as a kid about how the world is, and eventually we will need to reflect the real thing.
Yes.
To you.
Yep.
And which is not sugar-coated, and you're not protected by your parents or anything on this particular field anymore, simply because you need to grow up to be an individual who will be able to handle yourself with this world, right? And if that illusion keeps going too much, which I kind of feel like is happening, yeah, we have to do the job in the college, and if we lose the last defense in college, then when they go to the real world, they will find the real world is very, very different from what they thought.
Yeah. This is it. I was listening to I think it was like a Freakonomics podcast. Are you familiar with Freakonomics? Yeah. Anyway, So there's this guy, I think his name is Stephen Levitt, and he's a college professor, economics professor, and he said, some parents and students would ask him, right, what is it about a college degree that makes students, more successful in life, however you want to define success. And his response is, I don't really know, right? I don't think
there's no controlled experiment done
right?
on that.
Yeah, there's nothing there. I don't think there's anything in any particular fact in my economics classes that really help them once they leave. Maybe here or there might be a fact that would be useful. And it's just like my college algebra students. I don't think there are very many facts from college algebra that are going to be useful to the students once they leave. But I know something is happening in the 15 weeks that I have them that is going to help them. And I think it's just this growth, right? This being challenged and responding to the challenges and learning how to deal with struggling.
It's a complicated thing.
It is,
and
yeah.
it's hard to measure, because one thing that caught my attention constantly is just like people saying useful. Okay, so whenever you say useful, I kind of feel like people are saying useful in terms of utilities, right?
Yeah.
Then you're comparing a person to something you buy online. If I spend $20, that thing can cut my hair. Meanwhile, give me a toothbrush and everything, right? But for human being, compared to a cold, solid product, we have something internal, which I feel like cannot be measured by any external measure except by the person themselves. Right? So if next time I hear useful, it's really hard for me to respond to anything. It's just like, you want that thing to be useful? Here's how I can make your kids useful.
Right.
For example.
Yeah. Yep.
You don't need a whole college on doing that. If you're just looking for a job, tell me what you want.
Yep.
You want a job? 2 months. Give me 2 months.
Yep.
They will find a job.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
You want them to be running faster? They will be like more efficient, whatever. I can train them to that. But is that really the useful you want?
Right. And I think, I've heard this before as well, where we need to be teaching, classes that are kind of focused on skills that students are going to use as soon as they leave and enter the job market. And the danger, well, first of all, I don't think that's possible, because as soon as we figure out what the job market is and we start training these students when they're freshmen, 4 or 5 years later when they leave, that job or skill might not even be useful anymore.
Nowadays, it's actually definitely it won't be useful anymore.
Yes.
It's so fast, right?
For sure. So I think that the best thing that we can do is just teach them how to learn, because that's the one thing that I think is going to be consistent whatever they end up doing, right? They're going to have to learn new stuff, and I can help them learn skills and techniques that will make them more effective learners. And I know that will be useful.
Interesting. I have this question in class actually the other day. That is, I learn a lot of stuff like chemistry, physics, and all the stuff. I'm just interested. Up to a certain point, I figured, okay, there's no way I can exhaust all the things I can learn in the world.
Right.
Because even if I exhaust it today, tomorrow,
Yeah.
more learning to do.
Yep. Exactly.
Right? And then I started to wonder, like, what would be the best way to approach all these kind of interesting stuff? Because everything is so interesting, right?
Yes.
I kind of see another way that is actually going back to the origin. Now, instead of going to all the details and all the expanding skills, trainings, whatever, how about we go to the fundamental? If you learn a fundamental thing, tomorrow it's just another manifestation of fundamental thing. For example, like the neural network AI. If you're good with geometry and derivatives, that's what AI is right now.
Really?
Great and decent.
Really?
That's it.
Huh.
Nonlinear representations. If you really want to say using neural network to do classification, right? It's nothing but you take the data, map it to high-dimensional hyperspace. Then you can use a linear hyperplane to separate the classes. The low dimension is not linear, but if you keep going higher, eventually they become linear. Once you understand things to that level, you really don't care about what's new.
Right.
Anymore, because you're pretty confident that there's a paper coming out and I can read it in 2 hours, half an hour, and I will be able to understand it.
Yep.
Right? Unless you are going into the application, you start to do all the engineers, now all the details start to matter.
Right.
But if just in terms of like learning in general, actually going to the fundamental is always the way.
Yep.
It's like learning physics. Do you really care about how to, like you know everything about physics? You go to the build a screwdriver for me. It's like, no, that's not my education. It's for build a combustion engine from scratch. Here's some wrench. Here's whatever. No, but I understand how a combustion engine works, and that will help me to design the thing later. And sooner or later, you realize in the future, because things get so complicated, everything is a collaboration.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
With other people and with machine.
Yep.
You probably don't want to push yourself to the machine side.
Right.
You probably want to keep push yourself to be, okay, now this can be automated by machine. What's my part in it? And surprisingly or not surprisingly, we talk about human being replaced by a machine, but you can always find something that machine cannot do. And probably that is actually where the fundamental of education is, in my mind, of course. And there is clearly a difference between education and training.
Yes, for sure.
Right. And if you think about trainings, like you go to a company, they hire you, they give you a 3-month training process. That's it. They never give you a 4-year training process.
Right. Yeah. Education. I forget who said this, but I have a poster in my office that said, education is not the teaching of facts, but it's training the mind to think.
Yeah.
And that's right, because those facts, those skills, right, once you get to your job, those are, right, takes a few months, and then you got them. But the thinking part, the creativity side, the making the connections between the ideas, that's hard to do. And it takes practice. And I think maybe another part of the education system is we give students practice being creative, trying to make connections.
Interesting. So that's kind of our view on the education system. At least I think we share that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How much you think the current education system is putting on this part?
Yeah, even in my classrooms, right? It's as much as I want my students to. So, in my ideal classroom, let's see, what would happen in my ideal classroom? I think it would be the curriculum would be driven by the students. They would say, I want to know more about this topic. I would limit the topics to math topics, of course.
Really, still related to the course title.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And then they would get, right, it would be something that they're curious about. And then, I would have to spend some time figuring out, okay, what would be a good project and what are the skills that they're going to need to actually tackle this type of a project. And then once they get to the point in the project where they start needing the mathematics, then then they need it, then they want it, then they're curious about it, and they're ready to learn it. It would be great if my classroom was more like project based or something like that. But I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
At least we can try it with independent study, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
For students who are interested in those kind of like, if you like a philosophy of a certain professor, a certain area, actually there's always a way to create a ideal, or try to create an ideal learning environment with only a handful of students.
Yeah.
Which is called independent study,
Yep.
which is almost like a research credit, right?
Yep.
So that would be a nice thing to try if you're listening to this, you're a student. That would be really nice, yeah. When I grew up, actually, I had a dream about what college looks like, because you read all the stories about Einstein and know all the stuff. What I was dreaming about is more about professors they are super intelligent, and you try really hard to get their attention, and once you get the attention, they will just push you every time you finish something.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So for different person, they can get vastly different outcomes from the same class.
Yep.
That's what more of I am thinking about. I'm a pretty self-driven person, so I don't care about if the professor tells jokes. Actually, I hate when the professor tells jokes. I feel like it's not the best usage of my time, unless I'm really tired that day. I feel like, I come here to see your mind.
Sure.
Give me more, please.
Yep.
If you could, just show me your view on this thing I care about.
Yep.
And suddenly that can just inspire me. So that's my dream. And also I feel like the professor should, in my ideal case, have solid support to say, I give you an A, and no question asked.
Right. Yeah.
I think you're good.
Yep.
Not because of personal, because they have their standard, right? But
Right.
like, you're good. You may not be able to do hand computing
Sure.
something, but I think you're ready to
Yep.
read this book now.
Yep.
So that would be but it's more like a personal relationship.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like a tutoring. Like, yeah, when you describe
Mentoring
it.
work.
Yeah.
More,
Yeah. Maybe that's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. More mentoring. That's
Mentoring.
exact-
But yeah, that's my dream of college, and that thing didn't happen in undergraduate. But I feel like in graduate, actually, the things started to be more like that. But I
Yeah.
still feel like there's a lot of student matching with one professor. He just simply cannot put in all the...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
I
hard.
think the. Yeah, I don't think there are enough resources. I don't think there are enough educators to do, I think, the things that we would want to do, right? Because, right, I can't imagine how it would be exhausting to, right? Because every semester my class, if, I was student
20, 30,
controlled,
40, yeah.
right, it would be exhausting to come up with projects and to make sure everybody's making progress and to, stay one step ahead of everybody. Yeah, that'd be really hard.
That's more like the traditional elite education system, yeah. But that
Yep.
way you cannot educate so many people.
Yeah.
But that was like when I grew up. That's always my mental picture of
Yep.
what college is. Speaking of that, actually, graduate school give us something which is interesting. That is, it's okay if you spend 2 months on a single paper, right?
Yeah, yeah, yes, exactly.
A lot of
Yep.
students in my class, I feel like one thing they're missing is actually, why don't I understand this thing now? I already spent 5 hours on it.
Yep.
It's like, nothing worthwhile is.
Yeah.
If you
yeah.
can understand something within 2 days, that thing won't be general relativity.
Yep. Yes.
It
Yeah.
took Einstein a whole life.
I tell my students, right, so there was a problem that I was working on as a graduate student, and it's still open. I still think about it every once in a while, but it's a problem I've been working on for like 6 years. And I don't know what the answer is. And yeah, and I don't know if I'll ever solve it,
Yeah.
to be honest. It's just out there, and it's something that I've been working on for a long time. And yeah, so then, right, when they've spent 15 minutes on a problem and they don't understand it, I'm like, well, give yourself a little more time.
Yeah. And you're not used to this because everything before was 5 minutes.
Yes.
You don't get it, the teacher is
Yep.
going to tell you the answer.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Interesting. So every time I think we introduce research in class, it's almost feel like I don't want you guys to be impressed by how smart or how great this thing is.
Mm-hmm.
It's more about how could you spend 5 years on a thing,
Yeah. Yep.
like consistently, and
Yep.
like how many things you have spent in your life which last for more than a year.
Yep.
Right, or reading a book which has more than 1,000 pages. I actually I did this once in my class. I asked like how many pages have you read in a single book before? Like how big
Mhm.
the book have you read? Like 200 pages,
Mm-hmm.
and probably like 1/3 of the class raised their hand. So nobody actually had read anything. The 2/3 of the class hasn't read anything more than 200 pages, and I pushed it to 500 and 800 up to 800. Only I think 1 or 2 students raised their hand.
Yep.
That's the moment I feel like, wow, you probably should really take a long series, just start reading it.
Yep.
To test yourself, can I do the same thing, keep the thing in my mind for at least longer than 2 months?
Yep.
That would be actually how you achieve anything that is worth doing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the problems of the future, or whatever that means, you mentioned this earlier, are going to be, there's no way that an individual is going to be able to solve the problems of the future. It's going to have to be teams. It's going to have to be collaborations. It's going to have to use, most likely, computers and AI.
And probably it's going to last long.
And it's gonna take a long time. I do the same thing. Actually, something similar to you, right? I talk about my research in class, and I talk about, hey, here's this paper, and I wrote it with this handful of undergraduate students, and we worked on this paper for 1.5 years, and this is right, and it ended up right. So 8 months of our thinking turned into this one page. So
Sorry, we didn't write down the things we tried, but didn't work.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah,
it's going to be 12 pages
exactly.
or even 100 pages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Just to give them some perspective, and to be realistic about right what are hard problems, and what should you do when you encounter hard problems when you leave here. I don't think, I guess maybe I've never thought about this before, but maybe that's kind of the progression of, college education, right? In your freshman year, hard problems take 15 minutes. And then
limited complexity.
Yeah. And then by your senior year, right, you're doing these semester-long capstone type projects that take months. I've never thought about it like that.
Especially when I graduated from my PhD, I finished all the results the third year.
Mm-hmm.
It took me 2 years to put them together.
Yeah.
Just write about it.
Yep.
It's just like the result is there already. How hard is it to put them in order and write? That's part of the reason. Go back to the blank sheet thing, right? It's actually why people hate writing.
Yeah.
Right? People hate writing. He said, I almost every student, I'm actually teaching a class next semester, which I have taught for twice before. Basically, the first thing I will ask them to do is actually just write down what you did, right? And they always say, like, I can't do it. I just don't know how to write it. Yeah. Do you see a problem there, though?
Yep.
Like, how are you supposed to communicate with other people? I can't do it. I just cannot communicate it.
Well, then it's almost worthless.
Or at least you have your own money put into that thing. You self-support yourself with fundings. Otherwise, you need to go back and convince people you need to invest money into my idea.
Yep.
Right, all the stuff. So communication become a really difficult thing simply because people don't think that thing is important, kind of.
Yeah, I agree.
We constantly tell them, like, it's important. They don't really realize it until they start doing this and they consciously know that this is hard not because it sucks. This is hard because I'm really bad at it.
Right. Yep.
Right.
And it's hard and why are you bad at it? You're bad at it because you haven't had to do it very much before.
And why don't we do that? Because it's hard to grade.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think that's one of those skills, right? Those life skills that I hope that students are getting out of my math classes.
That will require a lot of your effort.
Technical communication. Are you communicating your ideas effectively to me? Because math is a technical subject, and communicating it is challenging.
Actually, if you think of the reverse, math is actually the simplest one to communicate, because you do not have to write anything that is not necessary. You just need to put the right stuff in the right order.
Yep.
If you didn't pick the word wisely, fine.
Yep.
Right? Yep. As long as the symbol is there in the right order, done.
Yep.
So people think writing math is hard. It's actually the reverse. Writing math is easy. Writing other stuff is hard. But it's easier to fool around with others' writings.
Yes.
You would think I put 3 pages. No matter how bad it is, it's 3 pages, dude.
Yep.
Right? But in math, it's like 7 lines. Okay, it's 3 lines.
Yep.
But my work is everywhere.
Yeah.
I feel so bad about myself, but actually, you just failed the easy stuff.
Yep.
The real thing is actually you shouldn't feel good about the 3 pages you just wrote down. It's crap.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times people come to me and ask me, like, how good is my writing? Or what is the right writing? I say, I don't know. I cannot tell you what is right.
Yep.
But I can tell you tons of things about what is wrong.
Yes.
So a right paper is a right paper, but the wrong paper is wrong everywhere.
Yep.
You don't just get one thing wrong.
Yep.
Or 2 things wrong. I don't even know how to start.
Yep.
That's part of the reason I think, like, it's so hard to grade those kind of things. Then of course we don't want to let students write so much because we have to grade, or we just let them write a lot but don't give them enough feedbacks of how to do this stuff.
Yeah, and I would agree that, right, because I'm not trained as a writer, and so I'm kind of like you, where I know this isn't good. I can't put my finger on it, but I think the only way I could fix it is if I just rewrote the whole thing, and that's not good feedback.
But that's actually really good when you write a paper with your students. It's the same thing with my teaching the class. I basically meet with them every 2 weeks just to tell them 17 stuff to change on your report.
Yeah.
Next time you come back, you change it 13, and then 15 more just pop up.
Yep.
Just keep doing this for 6 iterations. In the end, we finally have something, I won't say decent even.
Right.
Even with this intense 2 hour every 2 weeks, intense feedback individually, still, it's barely acceptable.
Yeah.
Right? It takes a long time to train.
I did something similar this semester with graph theory, where I had, so I gave them 4 like hard graph theory problems that they had to prove, and they were due 3 weeks later, and then I would give them feedback on those 4 problems and give them 4 new problems, and then they could turn in both of those, so these 8 problems, 3 weeks after that, and then, right, I'd give them 3 more problems, give them feedback on the first 8, and then so what ended up happening is by the end of the semester, the goal was to have, 16 pretty darn good proofs for these hard graph theory problems, and right, I had high grand expectations,
Nope.
and some of them just ignored the feedback, and which was pretty frustrating, right?
It all depends on how much energy they put in this class.
Exactly.
Right? So there are so many classes going on.
Yeah.
I kind of remind us like how we kind of forget about how bad our writings are.
Yeah.
Before the PhD and after the PhD.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Writing my first paper was just, even writing the dissertation.
Or even just the proof. The first proof you write, right?
Mm-hmm.
It sucks. Like everything not necessary is there. So many words until you do it. I don't know how many times, but suddenly I feel like one thing just clicked.
Yeah.
After you see enough proofs written by other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And this goes back to that memorization thing, right, that we talked about earlier. Right? When I first started writing proofs, it was mostly just, it was an algebra class or analysis. I just memorized, okay, I'm just going to memorize all these proofs from these 2 chapters. And I did. And I did well in the classes. And then, right, all those techniques are now just floating around.
Yeah.
And at this point, I've written so many proofs that, right, I still can't, and this is maybe something that I don't impress upon my students enough, but it is rare that you can give me even a proof that we did in class in graph theory this semester, and my PhD is in graph theory and linear algebra, so I've written lots of graph theory proofs. Even a proof that I wrote this semester, if you said plop down a theorem in front of me and said prove it, I would probably have to rewrite it at least twice. It would be very rare for me to just sit down and write out a proof the first shot perfectly. I know I would have to change a sentence or change a word or change the flow, or insert I needed to define this variable earlier or something like that. And I tried to impress that upon these graph theory students and say, hey, this is why I'm giving you these opportunities to rewrite. And what they didn't do that I do, and I think I should have communicated this more clearly, is typically when I'm going to sit down and, I read a proof and I'm like, I don't like that. I just throw the whole thing away and start over from scratch. And I think what they were doing is they were starting with their kind of broken proof and then trying to tweak it and fix it. And every time they tried to tweak and fix it, it just got a little bit worse.
It's almost like an engineer with this theory, right? Engineers is all about putting patches on. And as long as this thing works, I don't really care. But from a mathematical point of view, if you can say something in 2 sentences, don't use 2 sentences plus another word. Right. So that's more like that's actually the beauty I appreciate about mathematics. Is just like what's important is there. If anything is there, even though it's a comma, it's there for a reason. Otherwise, the comma won't be there. Or this guy doesn't know how to write proof. Right. So that's so beautiful for me. Every time I read something with mathematics, and after that, you start to actually lose. When I look at other people's writing, I just think, I don't want to read this. Just like I don't know where to focus. If you summarize everything, it's just 3 sentences, but you give me 12 pages. So where? Tell me where.
An example of this just happened. I'm doing research with a few undergraduates, and we, one of them, she wrote. Right, she's got this great result, and there were like 3 or 4 lemmas leading up to this nice theorem, and the lemmas took, I think it was 2 pages, and then we sat down together and started reworking the proofs, and we realized actually these 3 lemmas are the same lemma. And we can put all the statement of all these lemmas into just one statement, and these 3 proofs are actually really similar, so we can, restructure the proof structure a little bit, and these 2 pages turned into a half a page. And it was, right? And she was a little bit upset, right? Because that was and I, understandably, right? Because she put in a lot of work and effort into these 2 pages. And I know that I've been there too, right? I've written pages and pages and pages and then realized, oh man, this is way easier than I'm making it, right? And it just condenses to this nice, crisp statement and this clean proof. Yeah.
It's interesting to think about the mindset. Actually, whenever that kind of thing happened to me, I feel excited instead of feel bad.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Like, phew, better.
Yeah.
I have a better way of saying the same thing and don't have to do it 3 times,
Yep.
right? So instead of saying like how much effort you put into there, just think about it. It's not wasted.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you won't be able to summarize the 3 into 1.
Exactly.
You won't even realize they're the same.
Yep.
Right? Plus, now next time if you have similar situation, you can actually start from the one point of view and give people 2 special cases compared to work it 3 times. So actually, that's definitely a gain.
Yes.
But I'm glad you are there to help her, so she knows that this is not a failure.
Yeah, this is exactly what we're trying to do, right? This is good. And that, right, it was clear that our perspectives were very different, and I had the reaction of, oh, this is great. Like, look at what we can do. And she's like, oh, man.
Same thing with presentations, actually. Every time we clap 3 slides into 1, they say, oh, there's so much work I did, but I didn't show it.
Yeah.
And you just say, hey, you just stop boring stop from actually getting the audience bored. So that's a good thing. You should realize, right?
Yep.
So, okay, let's go back to the growth mindset.
Sure.
One last question. Do you believe growth mindset is lifelong?
No. I think, we didn't touch on this much, but I think your mindset changes from day to day, or can change from day to day. It can change from subject to subject, so it can change hour to hour. Right? I had a really, fixed mindset about English and writing, for example, until I became a graduate student and was kind of forced to do it. I just believed that I wasn't good at it. So then I didn't do it, and then it was reinforced, and I didn't practice, and I wasn't good at it. And now I am much better at writing now. I wouldn't say I'm good, but I am way better than I used to be, and I don't have such a fixed mindset about it. Right? I do it, and I actually kind of enjoy it now, and I like writing. And I like explaining, right? I like writing about mathematics. Maybe let's be clear. I like writing about mathematics and explaining mathematics.
I like writing emails.
Yeah. And so that my mindset has changed about English in particular, and I've seen my students' mindsets change, in the course of 15 weeks during a semester. Right? There are plenty of students that have come in hating mathematics, and they leave the classroom and it's their favorite class, and it's and I think that part of it is because maybe this is just me being naive, but I think it's because I pushed them so hard and they had to work so hard to earn that, even if it's a if it's a grade that they wouldn't have been proud, like a C, right? Most of these students come in and they've never seen a C, and they come in and they work really hard and they get a C, and it ends up being their favorite class and their worst grade.
It changed from not doable to doable.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? That's fundamental, actually, compared to doing better.
And it's even, I think it's even a more fundamental change than that. It's a change of, right, it's not believing that you can do it, and then actually doing it. I think that's even a bigger
So it's
change.
not about mathematics. It's just like you open all the other doors. Now all the stuff I believe I cannot do before.
Yes.
From now on, every single challenge I have, I do have another option. Instead of saying like I'm not born for this, I can do something about it. So is it fair for me to summarize in the following? The first one is actually, you don't have a growth mindset person or fixed mindset person, but the same person can have a growth mindset on different topics at different stage of your life.
Yes.
And not just academic success, relationships, families, whatever, right? And at least for now, you are aware of mindset can play a big role in making decisions and making effort. growth mindset also become a possible option.
Yes.
If you find it too hard, still fine, you're going to struggle, but at least it's an option, you can work towards that. And also, if you feel like I'm overwhelmed about, growth mindset is kind of like consuming, they want me to work on everything.
Right.
Remember, you always have a priority.
Yep.
So if you have growth mindset on 3 things you want to do, you probably want to prioritize it instead of letting become a burden. Say, hey, I need to keep a growth mindset of everything.
Yep.
But if there is anything you have to do either way, I think growth mindset not only make you more successful compared to fixed mindset, it also makes the whole journey more enjoyable.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Okay. Thanks for joining us today.
Cool.
That was a nice conversation.
Yeah, that was a great conversation.
Thanks.
All right.